Well, that wasn't great. I just got a stern talking to from the authorities telling me that I should not be doing this here. That's fine. Hey kid, wanna buy a big truck? I'm like, yeah. Hello everyone, and welcome back once again to the channel, Adventure Ridiculous. My name is Sam, and today is a video that I promised you guys a long time ago, and then I never delivered, to be honest. Life got in the way, I got onto other things, and this is not a video that I ever wanted to rush into. I really wanted to give it some time, let it sink in, and really determine how I felt about this subject before I made a video. Can you guys hear my cat in the background? She's going crazy. Anyways, what I am talking about is the HRG 2-inch Ultimate Lift Kit that I installed on my Civic about 6 or 8 months ago now. And I originally put it on, I've had it on 2 cars now. I originally put it on my 96 Honda CX hatch, and then I don't know, 4 or 5 months after that, I put it on a 94 Honda Del Sol SI. And happy to report it fit both cars just fine. Obviously, one is an EK and one is an EG. The kit is advertised to fit all 92 to 2000 Honda Civics, and I can confirm that that is true. It should also be noted that I am not sponsored by HRG in any way. They did not send me this kit for free. I paid full price for it, and as such, I am not obligated to make a review at all. I'm not obligated to make it a nice review or a good review or a bad review or a neutral review. I can say whatever the hell I want about this product, and I will. That being said, judging on the title, I just want to let you guys know that this is not a hatchet job on HRG. I appreciate that they exist. I appreciate their company and that they are American made. And I do have some good things to say about this kit. And I want to get those out of the way first. I want to kind of go over some of the pros of this kit. And then we will get to the cons and the reason for the title. First of all, I will say that this kit is really well made. The welds are solid. The steel is nice and thick. They're really good parts. The spacers are good parts. It also comes with these camber adjustable upper control arms for the rear, which are like turnbuckle style. And these are really, really excellent quality. I have purchased camber adjustable control arms for Honda Civics before. They're all over Amazon and eBay, and most of those are junk. And if you've ever used them, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They're the super cheesy Chinese billet aluminum crap. The threads tend to blow out. They break, they crack, they go bad. I actually watched a video before I bought this kit. I watched a video of a guy who ordered the HRG 2-inch lift spacers, and he didn't want to order the camber adjustable part. He didn't want to order the ultimate kit, so he just ordered the basic kit, and he ordered eBay camber adjustable upper control arms for the front and rear. He put the car together, he put the lift kit on, he put the eBay camber adjustable front upper control arms on, set the car on the ground, and the ball joints ripped out of the upper control arms in the front. Like, he didn't even drive the car. He just assembled it, put it together, set it on the ground, and they like exploded, just disintegrated. And he was like, man, he was talking about it, he's like, you know, I'm actually glad it happened here in the garage rather than, you know, jumping on a public road or on a highway or something and then getting down the road and having this thing have some sort of a catastrophic failure. But I watched that and I sort of was like, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and pop for the full kit. I know that HRG I've heard from many people that they stand behind their product. They do have a warranty on it. If anything like crazy goes wrong with it, they will replace it or refund your money. So I ordered the whole kit, and honestly, one of the ways that I feel like it's almost worth the purchase price is those camber adjustable control arms. And it also comes with camber adjustable front ball joints. Instead of front control arms, you use the OEM front control arms. We'll talk more about that a little bit later, but basically the camber adjustable parts of that kit are really, really solid. They're really high quality. They're not something that's just gonna fall apart, and I think that that is a really high pro on my list for this kit. I also appreciate that HRG is an American company, that they are making these products available, that you can order them up. Honestly, the wait time wasn't bad. I was worried when I ordered them that they were going to take forever to get here, and they really didn't. They were pretty quick about getting it out. So overall, I feel like the company doing what it does is pretty solid, and I appreciate that they exist. I hope that they'll keep making products, and hopefully I can keep buying them. With all that being said, I would like to talk about a few of the negative aspects of this kit. This is probably what you're really here for. First of all, the instructions are not great. And when I was installing it the first time, I had a pretty tough time figuring out mostly the front spacers. The front spacers are smaller than the rear. It doesn't say this in the instructions anywhere. Basically, the instructions just say that when you're installing the front spacers, you'll have to turn the top hat 90 degrees. And from that, I was able to figure out that these ones are for the front, because these are the ones that are mounted 90 degrees. And the larger ones only have 2 mounting holes that are they go straight through. So logically, these had to be the rears. But it would have been nice if they would have just said, these ones are the rears, these ones are the fronts. And for some reason the instructions just didn't do that. Also, turning top hats on the front strut 90 degrees is really difficult to get it exactly 90 degrees. And also, if you don't have spring compressors, then basically I resorted to doing something really sketchy, which is I loosened the nut on the top hat without actually taking the strut all the way apart. And then I put some ratchet straps on the spring, cranked it as tight as I could to try to relieve some of the pressure on the top hat. And then I was actually able to turn it a little bit at a time. Even doing that, it still took me a really long time to get the struts assembled in a way where they would go back in the car with the spacers, because I would get the top hat turned and it'd be like 100 degrees or 95 degrees from where it used to be, and so the bolt holes just wouldn't quite line up. I was able to make the installation a lot easier after the fact by disassembling the struts all the way and putting eBay coil adjusters on it. Then it would go in really easy. You could just turn it any old way you wanted to. Get it all set up in there and then crank the preload on the eBay coils, but trying to do it on the stock struts was a real pain, and the instructions just didn't make it quite as easy as it could have. I also noticed on these front spacers, these are the only ones that have a threaded bolt hole. This bolt hole here is threaded, and on one of these, just one, when I went to put it together the first time, I actually dry fitted all of these. And when I was dry fitting them, one of them, I think it's actually this one, had a little bit of welding slag down in the threads. And, you know, stuff happens. It's a small company. I'm sure they don't have time to dry fit every single one they make to make sure that the threads work. But it was just a little annoying having paid $500 for a kit that I then had to chase the threads on this just to clean it up. And even after chasing the threads, it's still just a little bit sticky from like that point where the threads got melted, and it just doesn't want to quite work right. All the others were fine, and I guess there was a reason why they wanted to have those particular bolt holes be the only ones that had a welded captive nut. All the rest are through bolts with nuts. So I don't know why, but that was just one more thing that was a little bit of a hassle when I was trying to put it together. The main flaw, the one thing that really killed this kit for me is that it's a spacer lift. And like, spacer lifts work. People have put spacer lifts on cars for a long time. Lots of people will tell you, if you just want an easy way to lift your car, just jack up the struts, put some spacers in there. Like, some people have made their own spacers out of steel. Some people have cut cutting boards up and just use the plastic as like a washer in there. There's a lot of ways to achieve a spacer lift, and it definitely will lift your car a little bit. One thing that I will say is that I thought that this kit was going to achieve me a really large amount of lift on my car when I first put it on. And when I first set it down, it looked like I had gotten a ton of lift. But of course the car settled, and after it had settled, a lot of that lift had gone away, and it really didn't look that lifted anymore. In fact, after I put the lift kit on, I can't tell you how many times people would say to me, "Oh, it would be cool if you lifted it." And I was like, it is lifted. It has a lift kit on it, but it just visually didn't really look like it was lifted. One thing that I will say about that is I didn't replace any of the bushings, and the car had 260,000 miles, so obviously the bushings are pretty thrashed. So what happens is when you make the spacer a lot taller, it puts all this extra pressure on the suspension, and all those bushings just get even more hashed and kind of make up some of the difference, which allows it to become lower again. But my Del Sol only had 90,000 miles. All of its bushings were pristine, and when I did the lift kit on it, it did the same thing. It settled, and then it barely even looked lifted. It actually was a little bit worse. I think maybe the wheel wells are smaller on the Del Sol because I put the same wheel and tire combo from the Ute onto the Del Sol, and it actually rubbed pretty bad in the rear, which is one of the reasons why I ended up taking this kit off and why it doesn't live on either car now. The other thing about this kit, being a spacer lift, is that it doesn't handle well, it doesn't ride well. All that pressure that you're putting on the suspension, it kind of achieves the same thing as if you had just cranked the preload up a lot. It makes the car really stiff, which isn't horrible like in the corners and the twisties sometimes, and if you're gonna do something dumb like I did and like tow with the car and put a bunch of weight in the back of it, it's kind of handy that the suspension is so stiff. However, the ride sucks, and it also made the handling really bad on both cars. Both cars handled fine without the lift kit. And as soon as I put the lift kit on them, the handling just got terrible. And what I mean by that is like the turn-in was bad. What am I looking for here? It had a bunch of torque steer. If you floored it, it would torque steer one way. If you let off the gas, it would torque steer the other way. There were so many weird characteristics about the way the front of the car worked after adding the lift kit. Honestly, in the rear, I don't think it even notices. I don't think the car even really cares about putting this lift kit on the rear. I think you could go more in the rear and it wouldn't care. But in the front is really where a front wheel drive car is doing everything. It's doing the steering, most of the braking, and the acceleration, all on the two front wheels. I also noticed some really bad tire wear. Obviously I didn't ever have it aligned. I never did an alignment on either car, so maybe with an alignment they could have been alleviated a little bit. I don't think you would have gotten all of that out. I let one of my friends drive the Ute one time. We went to buy the Nissan hardbody pickup, and I think we went down to like Salem, somewhere down south. And we went there, we bought the truck. I told him, hey, I'm driving the truck back, you drive the Ute back. When we got back into town here, he was like, dude, why didn't you tell me that this car handles terrible? And I was like, oh, I guess I'm kind of used to it now, and I assumed everybody knew. Like, it's a lifted car. Of course it handles terrible. But But while we're on that subject, my girlfriend also drives a lifted car. It's a 2008 Subaru Outback that I actually bought for myself a long time ago. And my girlfriend drove it a couple times and she loved it. And she's like, I really want this car. What can we do to make that happen? So I ended up basically selling it to her. She bought me out of it. That's been her car for over a year now. It has a 3-inch ADF lift kit on it. It has 28, 29-inch tires on it. Pretty big tires on it. Spacers. It's got all these things on it that should make it handle terrible, and honestly it handles like a brand new car. I honestly forget that it is lifted every time I drive it. Every time I drive it, I feel like I'm just driving a boring 2008 Subaru Outback grandma's car, and then I go to climb out of it and my foot doesn't touch the ground and I go, whoa, that's right, this car is lifted. Every time, because it always surprises me how really nice that car drives for being a lifted car. And I think that the difference here is that the HRG Lift Kit that we're talking about is just a spacer lift. It's the wrong way to lift a car. Does it work? Sure. But it's still the wrong way to lift a car. And the ADF kit on the Subaru is 4 times the price, but it includes subframe spacers, tubular control arms, camber adjustable, and I'm pretty positive that that car has been aligned. And the difference is just insane. It handles so much better. It handles still just exactly the way it did from the factory. It's a great handling car. And the Ute, when it had the lift kit, handled terrible. When I took the lift kit off to put it on the Del Sol, I instantly noticed that all of a sudden the Ute handled so much better. I mean, it handled like a new car again. I was like, wow, this car is fantastic to drive now. And then I went and drove the Del Sol with the lift kit on it, and I hated it. The Del Sol drove 10 out of 10 perfect without the lift kit. And once I put the lift kit on, all of its handling characteristics just went to hell. It drove horrible. It drove so bad that I knew I was taking it right back off. As soon as I'd put it on, I was like, I had instant regret. I was like, man, I can't believe I did this. And to be honest, a lot of what I'm complaining about is like highway characteristics. And most of the people who put a lift kit on their Honda Civic probably aren't doing it to daily drive it on the highway. That I recognize that. I'm a bit of an anomaly in the fact that I wanted to daily drive this car with a lift kit on it in the first place. I think most people who want to put a lift kit on a Civic have something in mind like the Gambler 500. They're just going to go beat the hell out of the car off-road, and they're really not that worried about handling characteristics. And to me, that makes sense. But what doesn't make sense is spending $500 on an HRG 2-inch Ultimate Lift Kit when realistically, all that person needs to do is just make these spacers, which are very simple. It's a very simple welding project to just slap these together. And you could make these for $50 in steel, weld them together in one afternoon, and have the same amount of lift. In fact, you could make them bigger and have more lift for your Gambler 500 project and not spend $500 on the HRG kit. The HRG kit is really nice. The quality is great, the powder coating is great, the camber adjustable kit is great, but honestly, you don't need any of that if you're just planning on taking the car out into the boonies and beating the hell out of it. That's probably not your biggest concern. So really, who is this kit made for? If it's not made for a Gambler 500 guy who just doesn't care and is going to beat the hell out of it, and it's not made for me who just wants to lift his daily driver and be able to drive it on the highway and have good handling characteristics, that tells me that it's really not suited for either one of those customers. If you wanted to appeal to the Gambler 500 people, maybe just spray paint it instead of powder coating it. Maybe go with slightly cheaper camber adjustables. You know, there are corners you could have cut to bring the price down that would have made it more realistic of a kit to buy. And in order to make it more appealing to me, I feel like the kit really needs a whole redesign to be more like the Subaru kit. It needs to have tubular control arms. It needs to be completely adjustable and like more like a long arm kit, like what they make for the Miatas, because just doing a spacer lift on a car that you're going to drive on the highway sucks. It's a terrible design, and that's why this lift kit is sitting in a box behind me and not installed on a car right now. I did sell the Del Sol, but I sold it at stock height with stock-ish wheels on it. I still have the Ute, and honestly, I don't have any intention of putting this lift kit back on the Ute either. I sold the wheel and tire combo that fit the lift kit. I put it back on also stockish style wheels. I just drove it over 100 miles today, and it drives fantastic. It honestly possibly drives better than it ever did before, which I don't really understand, but I'll take it. But yeah, the lift kit, probably not going back on. I'm also not going to get rid of the lift kit because it's really not worth what I paid for it on the used market. I would never get my monies back. And it's also missing the front ball joints because when I installed the lift kit, the car had stock front ball joints. I removed those, of course destroying them, and I put the camber adjustable ball joints in the upper control arms of the Ute. Those were the only ball joints that I have for the Ute to drive around on now. So when I installed the lift kit on the Del Sol, I actually went to O'Reilly's and I bought a couple of, apparently O'Reilly's sells pretty much exactly the same thing that the HRG lift kit comes with, which is, it's like an eccentric ball joint that has a nut on top. So instead of being pressed in, you tighten it on. It's like a threaded piece that threads together from the top and bottom. And then you turn it, and where you turn it to, it's eccentric, so that adjusts the camber while still using the factory upper control arm. So I bought another set of those and put them on the Del Sol. And then of course when I took the kit off of the Del Sol, those were still the only ball joints that I had for that car to move, so I had to leave them on the Del Sol. So the Del Sol, wherever it is now, has brand new upper camber adjustable ball joints for no reason. And the Ute also has, a couple thousand miles used camber adjustable eccentric upper ball joints, but the kit doesn't have ball joints anymore. And it doesn't make any sense to me to go buy another set of ball joints just to put them in the kit and then try to sell the kit. I probably wouldn't even get that money back. Throwing good money after bad. So instead, I think I'll just hang on to it. There is always a chance that at some point I might buy another Honda Civic and want to put a lift kit on it again. If I do, maybe I'll end up using some of these parts. Maybe I'll end up modifying them. I thought about cutting these spacers in half and stretching them to make them taller to try to get more lift. I've also talked to a fellow, he's on the East Coast somewhere, out east. He's been doing, his name is Safari Civic on Instagram, and he's put together a whole custom suspension setup that uses like a newer gen Accord front strut with the Civic fork on it. It's very complicated. He's got all these different OEM parts that he's kind of cobbled together to make a really big lift kit on his car. It looks awesome though. Maybe someday I will try that again. Right now the Ute is actually the only running and driving car that I own other than the motorcycle. It's my daily. So I'm kind of just leaving it alone for now and not really messing with it too much. It's been very reliable for a long time. It's done everything I need it to do, so I think I'm just gonna, I'm pretty tuckered out on it as a project anyways. I've kind of lost interest, so now it's just that my daily driver, shitbox Ute. So yeah, that's how I feel about the HRG Lift Kit. I hope you enjoyed this review. I hope you learned something from it. I definitely am not trying to trash HRG. I really, really appreciate that they make these parts at all. I appreciate that they're supporting Hondas and making lift kits for Hondas. That's awesome to see. If anything, it's just my hope that someday they will make more elaborate kits for these cars. They're definitely in the rear. There's a lot of ways that you can easily achieve more lift. You could just make a spacer for where the lower control arms attach. You could make tubular lower control arms. Like, there's a lot of different ways that you could achieve more lift in the rear. Obviously the front is a bigger can of worms, and I'm not a suspension engineer, so I don't claim to know all the answers, but I would just love to see something come out that was a better solution than just making these a cheesy spacer lift. Like, it's just the most simple, cheap way to lift a car that's been done by many, many, many rednecks. It'd be really cool to see something a little bit more complicated being offered. And at the price point that I paid for this kit, for like, if you owned a truck, you could buy a really nice, high quality lift kit that would get you a few inches, totally reliably, really clean, good handling characteristics, no problem. And I understand that the Civic isn't a truck, but on the other hand, I feel like most people who want to lift their Civic are probably more budget minded than the truck consumers anyways. So, you know, it's just kind of an understanding your market and your niche and how to fulfill that. Maybe they feel like there's not a market for a more complicated lift kit for Honda Civics, and that might be true. On the other hand, it seems to be only gaining in popularity and gaining in traction. When the lift kits first came out for the Miatas, the big long arm ones, people were like, no one's ever going to buy that. You're never going to sell those. And I have seen so many of those kits on Miatas now. They have really taken off. I feel like the Gambler 500 is partly to thank for that. It's really started this whole trend of lifted cars and people driving lifted cars and wanting to build lifted cars. And I think that that trend is only going to continue. And I still think that Hondas are going to be one of the choices that people make because they are cheap, they're reliable, they're readily available, they're super easy to modify, and easy to build. And I think that that appeals to a lot of people. It's a pretty wide range of people who participate in the Gambler 500. I've met all sorts. And yeah. Anyways, like I said, I'm not trying to attack HRG. I just would like to see a product a little bit better engineered. But like I said previously, as far as the build quality goes, as far as the quality of the parts themselves that you're getting, it is a really solid kit. I did run this kit for thousands of miles between the two cars, and I never once had an issue. I installed it on the Ute, uninstalled it, installed it on the Del Sol, uninstalled it, and I never had an issue with any of the threads blowing out or anything not wanting to come apart or seizing or whatever. I did use Loctite on some of the parts just because it was going to be on a car that I was taking on the highway. I still never had an issue getting anything apart or back together again. So as far as the build quality goes and the quality of the parts you're getting, very high recommendations. As far as the handling feel, what it will do to your car, it sucks.